Taoiseach, we read today that the presidents of the 5 courts have written to you and to the government articulating their view that the proposed judicial appointments bill, Minister Ross's bill, has severe implications for the administration of justice in this country. And I put it to you, Taoiseach, that we also read and hear that the government nearly collapsed last week, and that the rushing through of the legislation is due to meet the needs and the demands of Minister Ross. The Minister Shane Ross wants to ram this bill through before the summer recess without amendment, and that he wants to get this through in order to support the government. Now, I would put it to you, this is a very serious issue that should be above party politics in many respects. This is one arm of the governing edifice, if you like, imposing a new system on a co-equal arm, the judiciary. And it's my view that the views of the judiciary should be known. The people should not be denied the views of the judiciary on such a central issue that goes to the heart of the separation of powers and indeed to the administration of justice in this country. And in my view, the motivation behind the legislation is wrong. I think if you look at all the quotations and commentary of Shane Ross for quite some time, he has portrayed the judiciary as some sort of self-serving, egotistical insiders who wait their buggin's turn, as he says today, to get their positions. Very damaging type of commentary on all of the judiciary. And he's made the comment that it's not good enough to have judges deciding on choosing their favourite ones, he said in recent commentary. Now, that's the wrong motivation for such a profound piece of legislation as this. And I think we need to be cautious as a House, irrespective of the numbers in the House and who can leverage the most power and get their way. This is a very serious issue that demands a bit more serious consideration than would appear to be the situation right now. There has been no compelling rationale put forward as to how Shane Ross's bill is superior to every other alternative. In our view, and we put forward legislation, we favour reform, as does everybody, including the judiciary. We believe the Chief Justice should be the chairperson of any Judicial Appointments Commission. I agree with the retired Supreme Court Judge Catherine McGuinness, who has said that this is a kick in the teeth to the Chief Justice to demote the position in such a manner. And the underrepresentation of judges is equally unacceptable. 3 out of 13. The people who know best in terms of people coming forward, in terms of their abilities and talents, having assessed and watched them.
Thank you, Deputy.
In the course. So, Taoiseach, would you first of all agree to publish the letter that you received from the Presidents of the Court? Is the Government open to serious amendment to the legislation that it's bringing forward? Is the Government determined to maintain the underrepresentation of judges and to undermine the status of the Chief Justice? And do you agree that the bill will, in fact, as the Presidents of the Courts are saying, will undermine the administration of justice in this country?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Deputy, I'll have to take advice as to whether I can publish it or not, but there's certainly nothing in the letter that hasn't, or no objection to the proposed legislation in the letter that hasn't already been flagged or appeared in the newspapers. And of course, there has been a meeting some months ago involving the Chief Justice and the Taoiseach and Taoiseach at the time to discuss the proposals that are being made by the government. So there has been engagement, both in terms of meetings and this letter, with the judiciary to hear their views on this legislation. I want to say, first of all, that the judiciary has served us very well, and I have immense respect for our judges, and I also have immense respect for our separation of powers in this state. But I do believe the time has come for reform. Reform in the way we select judges, and it does need to be more transparent and needs to be more independent. It's important to explain what's going to happen if this legislation is enacted. First of all, the President will continue to appoint judges. That's what's in the Constitution. The President will appoint judges on the nomination of the Government. Those things will not change. They're in the Constitution. What this legislation is about is the process by which 3 names are put to the Government. So essentially, the Judicial Appointments Commission will put 3 names to the Government from whom the Government will choose a judge. The legislation will also prevent canvassing. It will require that merit be the criteria for the appointment of judges. and the Judicial Appointments Council will have a lay majority and a lay chair, and everyone will have to apply to it, including sitting judges seeking promotion. Having a lay chair is not unusual. It's the case in England, for example. It's also the case in Scotland, where there's an equal number of legal and non-legal, or lay members, if you prefer to use that term. It's also very much the modern way by which we appoint people to senior positions in public office. If you take, for example, the Secretary-Generals of government departments, the most senior people in government departments, it may have been different in the past, but at least in recent years, they are selected through TLAC, the top-level appointments committee. And that committee is not chaired by a civil servant, and the majority of people on that committee are not chaired by civil servants. In the old days, civil servants may have selected Secretary-Generals from among themselves. In the modern world of selecting people to appointments, it doesn't happen that way. If, for example, in the private sector, a new CEO is being appointed to a company, it's not by a committee of CEOs. It's usually a board. The board of the company will set up a subcommittee, and they'll have non-executive directors, often a majority, who will select who the new CEO is. And, for instance, hospital consultants, and I just checked this yesterday, when hospital consultants, like brain surgeons, cardiac surgeons, geriatricians, any type of consultant you want to name, when they're selected in HSE hospitals at least, it may be different in voluntary hospitals, but in HSE hospitals at the least, the chairman of the interview board comes from the Public Appointment Service and is not a doctor. So, these reforms are really bringing us into the modern world in terms of having transparency and having greater independence and having more lay people involved in selecting people for key public office.
Deputy Martin.
We get these empty phrases like the modern way that mean absolutely nothing. They mean nothing. There has been no compelling rationale for the changes. And deep down we know that the vast majority of Fine Gael deputies don't even agree with this bill, because this bill has been forced through because of the leverage that Minister Ross has. Same way as the DUP leveraged $1 billion, an extra $500 million in terms of their talks with the Conservatives. At least the billion will help the people of Northern Ireland. This bill that Minister Ross is leveraging because of the unique position he finds himself in my view, will damage the separation of powers, will damage the judiciary and will undermine the administration of justice. That is our view. And in particular, the relegating of the Chief Justice, the status of the Chief Justice, is inconsistent with the Chief Justice's constitutional position in relation to the judiciary and leading the judiciary. And the underrepresentation of judges, who are uniquely placed to assess the candidates who are going to come forward for application, is, in my view, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I think, from any perspective, there should be a reasonable space allowed for genuine interrogation of this bill. Not just in terms, because there has been no compelling rationale, other than Minister Ross's demonising and undermining of the judiciary for the last 2 years. That is what he has done in his relentless commentary.
Thank you, Deputy.
So he doesn't talk about it being modern. He talks about allegedly getting rid of insiders, of people choosing their own, which I think is very damaging to the judiciary, who actually have been the first out of the traps years ago, calling for reform of the judicial appointments system. They were the first out of it. And it's no way to present the bill. It's no way to present the bill. To present it in a way that is controversial, that is negative, and that undermines the judicial arm of this. Because I finally say this. Over 30-odd years of paramilitary violence and so on, our constitutional democracy and the arms of our state survived and sustained. No less than the judicial arm of our state.
Time is up.
And it weathered all of that. And you should not succumb to just having to placate Minister Ross on such a fundamental issue that goes to the heart of how we organise our affairs in this society.
Taoiseach.
First of all, I just want to say that I have immense respect both for the current Chief Justice, who I have known since I was a teenager, and also the office of Chief Justice. I have immense respect for both the individual and the office. It is not the case in either England or Scotland that the Chief Justice in those jurisdictions chairs their Judicial Appointments Committee. So I don't see that as a denigration of anyone's office. It's very much the precedent in our neighbouring jurisdictions that the Chief Justice doesn't chair the similar committee. The rationale behind it is threefold. We want these appointments to be less political in the future, we want them to be more transparent, and we don't want any profession to be self-regulating or self-appointing. We've moved away from self-regulating, self-appointing professions a long time ago, When you were last in government, for example, you took a decision to remove the medical majority on the Medical Council. Now, I know it's not the same thing. The Medical Council doesn't hire doctors, but it can strike them off. And we have a Medical Council, a reform brought in when you were in office to remove the medical majority on the Medical Council. And there was a similar rationale behind that, is that no profession should be self-regulating or self-appointing. And that's why there's a lay majority now on the professional regulator for almost every profession. This is the trend in policy, it's the trend in modernity and the trend in terms of reform.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
I just want to point out as well that this legislation, this legislation is not Independent Alliance legislation, it's not Fine Gael legislation, it's government legislation. It's in the programme for government, as is the commitment to a lay chair, as is the commitment to a lay majority, and it was a programme for government that was supported by the Independent Alliance, by independents, and ratified by my party at our special conference in Athlone. So it's been our position for at least a year now. But one final point, and I think it is important. I have no intention of rushing this bill through. I think that there should be plenty of time for open debate and plenty of time for amendments. Absolutely.
Thank you, Taoiseach.